Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on something a little different. We're looking at the intricate blueprints of modern storytelling.
We are. We're talking dense lore, historical research, and this really cutting-edge fusion of human narrative and artificial intelligence.
And we're going to unpack the final result. The story we're diving into is the saga of General Beauregard. And it was born from this just incredibly complex process.
I mean, you've got decryption of field notes by AI, a massive story Bible called the Cooter Palimpsest, multiple passes through advanced language models. It's a lot.
It's a whole thing. But our listener, K. Brad Barfield, who actually developed this process, he put us on a very specific mission.
Yeah, he was very clear. He knows how the sausage was made,
Uh,
the iOS recorder, Gemini deciphering his notes, ChatGPT iterating. But he wants to know, what about the story?
the story itself, is it any good?
Exactly. So we're doing a purely literary evaluation, supposed to be a third eye, and really get at his core questions. Is it worth reading? Is it actually funny?
And the big one, especially for this kind of Southern Gothic absurdism, does it achieve what he calls fiction sense?
That is the ultimate test, isn't it?
Mm.
We're not grading the algorithm today. We're analyzing the narrative architecture.
Right. So for anyone just joining us, the premise is just perfect Southern chaos. We're following this anonymous narrator, the logistics officer,
Surprisingly grounded guy. He has a college education, we're told.
and he is shepherding his delusional rooster, a red jungle fowl named General Beauregard, along with their expeditionary force.
donkey.
A donkey. They're going from Egypt Township, Arkansas, on a crusade to the town of Warren.
And their enemy.
Their enemy is the Pink Orb, the nefarious tomato warlord. It's what, a few dozen miles of rural road that gets transformed into this epic journey.
And our focus today, as he asked, is to really slow things down. We need to look at how the story pulls off that journey. How does it make sure the general's profound delusion, his, let's call it function B, the mythic reality, how does that hold together when you've got the driver's function A, which is just the logistical reality of a 1994 F-150, and a bank account that is definitely not infinite.
If that internal logic breaks, the whole story just collapses into nonsense.
But if it holds,
Yeah.
then we've got something really special, a unique piece of literature.
Okay, so let's start where the delusion begins. The geography. The Cooter Cinematic Universe, or CCU.
Yes.
It all centers on this farm in Egypt Township, Ashley County, and it's described as 40 acres of mild chaos. I love that. That adjective, mild, is doing so much heavy lifting.
It's the whole narrative contract right
Yeah.
there. It tells you the chaos is systemic, it's accepted, and crucially, it's navigable.
You can live with it.
You can live with it.
Yeah.
The story has to establish right away why this place, these specific 40 acres, is maybe the only place on Earth where a rooster can declare war on a tomato and the guy paying for gas actually takes him seriously.
So what's the answer? Why there?
It's the vacuum of authority.
Okay, explain that.
The story talks about the old historical voice of the whole region, which was the Crossett Lumber Company mill whistle.
Right, I remember that part. It used to scream at 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening. It set the schedule for thousands of people.
It was the voice of God. It was the mechanical dictator of the industrial age.
And now...
And now it's silent. That massive, geometry of the industrial complex, the steam, the precision, the efficiency, it's all decayed. And that is such a crucial foundation for Southern Gothic. You have the ghosts of failed industry.
So the silence of the whistle creates this metaphysical void.
A void. And nature, or at least nature in this story, abhors a vacuum.
And it gets filled by rooster time. The general's crow becomes the new sovereign command.
Exactly. His crow becomes the biological declaration of war against the silence. And that shift everything. The whole rhythm of the farm moves from this rational, measured clockwork thing from the mill.
Which demanded human compliance.
Yes. And it moves to the manic, self-declared authority of a bird.
Which demands mythological compliance.
That's it. That one shift validates the entire premise of the war. If the old god is dead, well, a new feathered one just has to take its place.
And there's one thing on the farm that visualizes this collision of, past industrial ambition and the current absurd reality better than anything else.
The chicken-shaped pool?
The chicken-shaped pool.
Oh, the pool is magnificent. We have to spend a minute on it because it's the central metaphor for the whole setting. The narrator calls it hydrological hubris.
Built during a good soybean year, 1982, it was this act of intentional geometric defiance against the normal suburban rectangle pool.
And it's anatomically precise.
Yeah.
60 feet long, a shallow end at the beak, deep end at the tail feathers. It's a solar temple, built in the shape of the very creature that believes he controls the sun.
But the reality of it is, it's leaking.
It's leaking.
And the detail that it's leaking specifically at the beak end is just, it's pure genius.
Of course it is. It's failing at the point of action, at the point of focus. It's a monument to a failed legacy.
And the narrator sees it in the twilight and thinks it looks almost like a cathedral.
Right. He's contrasting that high spiritual ambition with the low, mundane reality of having to constantly go out there and patch these little hairline fractures with hydraulic cement.
So this instability, this constant fight between the grand vision and the leaking reality, that's the essence of the CCU.
It is. The geography itself is structurally unstable, which is perfect because it's preparing you, the reader, for the narrative instability of the journey you're about to take.
Okay, that brings us to our anchor in all of this, the logistics officer, the driver. If the setting is pure chaos, his voice has to be the equilibrium.
It does.
But here's my question, my challenge with him. If he has a degree, if he's, and I quote, read books that do not feature livestock, doesn't his compliance make him kind of the most tragic figure here? He's fully aware of the nonsense he's enabling. Is he a reliable narrator, or is he actually the central victim of this whole farm's manufactured gravity?
That is the narrative tension that the entire story lives on.
Yeah.
And it's precisely why he is reliable, at least for the reader. He operates in what you could call the compromise zone.
The compromise zone.
He knows the reality, that's function A. But he executes the delusion function B flawlessly. He's not delusional himself, he's just compliant.
So he's welding the rebar perch to the dashboard for safety reasons, not because he thinks the rooster is the CEO.
Exactly. And he's ironing the donkey's bandana out of a logistical necessity. It's about troop morale, not spiritual devotion.
So his compliance isn't stupidity. It's a choice he makes to maintain some kind of order in a world that's defined by disorder.
Precisely. His dry, grounded, almost weary perspective is what keeps the story from just dissolving into, surreal nonsense. He's the man with the checkbook. He knows about tire pressure. And that forces the general's mythology to at least pretend to adhere to basic physics and financial limits.
His internal monologue, his ability to see the pool as both a cathedral and a hydrological disaster.
That's the mechanism. That's what makes the fiction sense possible at all. The story is readable because we have a guide who understands the madness but facilitates it anyway. And he admits later he says he needed to drive, which suggests his compliance is a kind of self-medication against that crushing silence of the post-industrial age.
Which sets up our protagonist perfectly, General Beauregard, the source of the grand delusion.
A magnificent figure.
Yes.
Magnificent. He's a red jungle fowl, described as having significant carriage, feathers like burnished copper. His authority is entirely self-declared.
And it's cemented by the most absurd thing, a plastic Big Chief pin he won in a fight with a child.
I love that detail. He is the CEO of a Fortune 500 agricultural conglomerate that exists only in his head, and he thinks Machiavelli was too soft. He is just pure, unadulterated military ego in a chicken's body.
And his theological motivation for this war is what takes the whole thing from like a domestic dispute and turns it into a full-blown crusade.
The tomato as the false sun.
The false sun.
It's genius because it's a direct response to his core identity. In his mind, he crowed the sun into existence. Therefore, anything else that is red and round and silent is a direct insult to his solar sovereignty.
So the Pink Tomato Festival in Warren, which is the absolute peak of Bradley County civic pride.
He sees it as a pagan ritual, a ritual designed specifically to mock him. By turning a simple tomato into a rival god, the story elevates a mundane drive to this profound philosophical conflict.
The stakes become existential.
Is the sun real, or is it a vegetable? And the logistics officer is now funding a theological war with $33,000.
So the stage is set, the motivation is, let's say, divine, but the expedition can't even get started until the prophecy is fulfilled.
Ah, yes, the prophecy of the general.
The sources detail this, and it seems designed to create maximum theological gridlock before they can even leave the farm. This is where we meet the rest of the Cabinet of Feathers.
The supporting cast that validates the general's madness. And that prophecy is a masterclass in just, well, delaying tactics. It needs the rattle of corn, the sigh of Memo, and the frozen donkey Bronchi.
But the real showstopper, both comically and thematically, is Okra, the pig.
Okra, the oracle, the high priestess of the mud. She holds the final necessary piece, the prophetic grunt.
And the general, this supposed tactical genius, is reduced to just frantic anxiety because Okra keeps sneezing instead of grunting.
It leaves them, as the narrator says, in the anticipation of trouble without the release of disaster.
I love that line. The general's military precision is completely helpless against, well, porcine indifference.
It highlights the limits of his authority, doesn't it? He thinks he controls the sun, but he can't control a large, bristled sow.
Ugh.
Okra doesn't follow the general. She follows the physics of the cooter farm.
And her moment of ratification, her grunt, it only comes when the atmosphere itself conspires with the general.
Yes. The sky bruises to that violent, heavy violet, the color of a plum tomato. The wind starts carrying the smell of hay and heartbreak.
What a phrase, hay and heartbreak.
That metallic, sort of rot-sweet smell of old river mud. That is the opening of the thin place. It's the moment the world itself is demanding a verdict.
So Okra isn't acting for the general, she's acting for the universe.
Exactly. She rises with this terrifying fluid grace, and she delivers the triple resonant grunt that just shatters the atmosphere. It seals the prophecy. The mandate for invasion is given.
She is the priestess of the mud, discharging her duty only when the earth itself forces the issue.
Yes, and that external validation is critical. It moves the whole mission from being General Beauregard's private breakdown to a necessary cosmic event. The world confirms the war.
But then immediately the story counters that huge spiritual drama with pure, unadulterated practicality. Memo, the Empress Dowager of the plantation. She's completely unimpressed. She's the true gatekeeper of reality and liquidity. She doesn't even glance at the purple sky.
Memo's role is so vital for the humor, for the grounding of the story. She's the arbiter of domestic consequence.
So while the logistics officer is digging up the mason jar with the Christmas bonus in it,
She's not debating theology. She's worried about the root system of her begonias. Her priorities are absolute. The garden comes before the crusade.
her fatalism is perfect. She just assesses the whole mission in one dry line. Better him than me. Watch out for the root system.
And that just encapsulates the humor of the whole genre, doesn't it? The real existential threat for her isn't the war itself, it's the collateral damage.
She's afraid the general will end up on a sandwich.
Or worse, that he might actually win and subject them all to endless military posturing. Her complete dismissal of his seriousness in favor of these immediate agrarian concerns, the roots, the sandwiches, that's the story's necessary reality check.
Okay, so the women of the house have confirmed the logistical needs and the spiritual mandate. But the heavy infantry, Bronchi the donkey, he introduces a whole new element.
Military dignity.
Military dignity. He's initially the frozen donkey from the prophecy, but once the mission is a go, he refuses to move until his sartorial standards are met.
Bronchi's character arc is just fantastic. He represents the need for dignified structure, even in the middle of chaos. He will not board that rusted trailer until his red bandana is freshly starched and ironed.
And the general issues the decree. A soldier must be crisp.
He does.
And so now we have the driver, the man with the college degree, ironing a donkey's bandana with heavy starch. He's taking instructions from Memo, who has to approve the crispness. This is the absolute peak of that compromise zone.
It is. The logistics officer compromises his own sanity for the moral imperative of his troops. The story is suggesting that moral maintenance is essential for logistical success.
And the payoff is immediate and hilarious. Bronchi just walks up the ramp without a sound.
It's an act of profound respect for the animal's dignity, and it cements his role as the absolute, indifferent, grounded anchor for the whole expedition.
And finally, the funding. The crusade is financed by Papa's Christmas bonus.
$33,000 in Jamp 20s, buried under the begonias in a mason jar.
This detail, it's not just exposition, is it? It's thematic.
Oh, absolutely. This cash, which is literally rooted in the earth, is the only acceptable currency in the Cooter cinematic universe. It represents Papa's absolute distrust of modern abstract finance.
The Federal Reserve to Papa was a house of cards built on a swamp of lies.
Exactly. Only cash that has endured moisture and earthworms and time can be trusted to finance a war against a rival god. It's the currency of the land itself.
And the final piece of regalia, the general's helmet of state.
The fiberglass Crosset Lumber Company yellow hard hat.
By co-opting this relic, the general is performing an act of historical myth-making.
He is. This isn't just a crown. It's a tangible link back to that steam and geometry era that defined the whole county. He's claiming the historical authority that was left behind by the silent mill whistle.
He's saying, the titans who built this industry are gone.
But I claim their mantle to fight the vegetable that grew in the void they left behind. It links his small, local war directly to the grand, destructive legacy of the industrial age.
Okay, so we've established the geography, the personnel. Now we get to the core question. Does the story make fiction sense?
The big one.
The narrative has to justify this blend of absurdity and real emotional weight. And it does this through that concept we mentioned earlier, the clash of frequency A and frequency B.
We need to slow down and really define this clearly for everyone. Frequency A is the reality of the logistics officer. Buicks, checkbooks, college degrees, physics.
The real world.
The real world. Frequency B is the mythic reality of the general. Solar authority, combat engineers, strategic pronouncements. The story never asks the reader to choose one over the other.
It demands you accept the intersection.
That's it. Fiction sense is achieved when the collision of A and B is consistent and it serves the emotional truth of the narrative.
So the world of the CCU is a place where these frequencies are just constantly colliding, creating these thin places on the road to Warren.
And the first major collision happens with a fallen sapper.
The dead armadillo.
The dead armadillo on the roadside. In frequency A, the driver knows what happened. It zigged when he should have zagged, got hit by a Buick. It's roadkill.
Simple as that. But in frequency B,
Instantly, it's elevated. It's a combat engineer who was assassinated by the tomato warlord while carrying maps of the irrigation grid.
and the general performs the right of the road, demands full military honors.
And this is the story using delusion to inject meaning. The driver, our anchor to reality, is forced to stop traffic for a eulogy for roadkill. Without the general's interpretation, it's just decay.
But with it, it's a warning, a casualty in an escalating conflict.
The emotional and narrative truth that the war has begun and there will be consequences, it trumps the biological fact of the armadillo's death. That is the architecture of fiction sense.
As they get deeper into the river bottoms, the journey gets more and more mythic. The fog rolls in.
Which is tactical obscuration deployed by the tomato warlord, of course.
Of course. And they encounter the supernatural gatekeeper near the Count of Milo, the
Oh.
luminous white dog.
This is deep regional folklore being woven in just flawlessly. The ghost dog is the watcher. It patrols the trace, the ancient paths carved by indigenous peoples and early settlers.
And the local legend is specific about this, right? The dog vets travelers?
It does. It distinguishes between tourists, people just passing through without understanding the history, and pilgrims, those on a necessary sacred mission.
And the general, instead of being scared, he just raises one wing in a slow, solemn salute.
That action is the ultimate validation. It confirms the general is a pilgrim, not a tourist. The dog dips its head in return and then just dissolves back into the fog. The mythic landscape itself has just ratified the mission. It allows them to proceed across the Saline River Bridge.
The Rubicon.
The Rubicon.
And that river crossing gives us one of the most thrilling supernatural moments. The impossible event. The long-dead F-150 radio just comes to life.
Yes. The dead radio flickers on, but not to a current station. It's the ghostly, tiny broadcast of King Biscuit Time from 1941. And it's followed immediately by the phantom whistle of the steamboat HM. Handy. We should pause on King Biscuit Time for a second. This was a legendary blues broadcast out of Helena, Arkansas, starting in '41. It was critical to the development of electric blues. It's a voice from a completely lost cultural era.
But the general, being the general, just dismisses the historical awe. He interprets it as...
Naval support confirmed and psychological operations by the ancients.
And that contrast is where the story just sings, isn't it? The driver is genuinely terrified. He can only process it as a ghost, a fundamental violation of frequency A.
But the general strategic interpretation that the ancients, the spirits of commerce and music that traveled that river, are supporting their journey, it gives the event context within the war.
So the story uses local history, the river trade, the blues, to grant the delusional protagonist essential strategic support.
The history of the land itself is assisting the current absurdity.
The journey then hits its deepest disruption, the fracture zone at Gee's Landing. The truck stalls in a sand blow right over the Saline River fault zone, and this is where reality starts to physically strobe.
It's a geological skip in the record. And the narrative risks complete incoherence here, but it uses the scientific reality of the fault line to explain the metaphysical weirdness.
The landscape flickers violently between the Triassic sector, cycads, giant dragonflies, a time before humanity.
In 1920, the clear cut, stumps, steam engine remnants, the absolute apex of human devastation. They're trapped between epochs, witnessing the history of destruction and regeneration just repeating itself over and over.
And their savior is Bronchi, the heavy infantry who's completely unaffected by this existential time warp.
Bronchi, the absolute anchor. He just finds a patch of brass that seems to exist in both the Triassic and the 1920 sector at the same time. He chooses Cud, and then with a sigh that seemed to ground the entire universe, he kicks the bumper.
He literally, physically rebooted the timeline.
Yes. His absolute indifference to the time distortion saves them from being swallowed by geological chaos. The General's Great War is saved by the brute, simple fact of animal existence.
That's profound. The chaos is vulnerable to the mundane. And the synthesis of frequency A and B is perfected in the General's conversation with the peppered shiner.
Near Horsehead Creek.
Right. This tiny rare fish is in trouble.
And the General receives a hydrosonic transmission. He hears a warning from a courier fish about a toxic plume that's stealing the oxygen. The delusion gives voice to the problem.
Meanwhile, the logistics officer sees the frequency a reality. He sees dead bream floating belly up, a chemical sheen on the water. It's probably fertilizer runoff or low-dissolved oxygen from the very tomato fields they're going to fight.
The brilliance here is that the delusion doesn't fabricate the crisis. It frames the reality. The General's madness is the only moral lens in the story that can clearly articulate the environmental tragedy that's happening.
The logistics officer even admits it. For once, you might be absolutely right.
The tomato warlord, the enemy, is fighting without rules. He's poisoning the very lifeblood of the land. And the General's War, which started as being about solar authority, has now become a necessary defense of the environment against industrial agriculture. This fully validates the story's fiction sense. The only way to tell the truth about the crisis is through the lens of absurd mythology.
So, as the expedition closes in on Warren, the general himself faces this existential crisis that grounds his delusion in truly human terms. It forces him to actually consider the consequences of victory. This happens in Sumter.
Sumter, yes, the ghost town. The argument for the impermanence of human ambition. The general, who is obsessed with empire and legacy, sees these ruins, the kudzu just eating the foundations, the evidence of scrappers, and he is terrified.
And it's not just an external fear, it's a fear of meaninglessness.
Exactly. He asks the driver the critical question. If we defeat him, if we topple the Red Orb, will Warren become like this?
And his greatest fear isn't ruin, it's quiet monotony.
His vision of hell is soybeans, the crop of surrender. Soybeans represent the sterile, orderly industrial rotation that requires no myth, no meaning, and certainly no rooster as CEO.
This is the moment the general becomes deeply sympathetic.
It is. His war isn't just for power. It's a philosophical defense of the farm's chaotic, myth-laden identity against bland economic efficiency.
But before the final siege, the story gives us this crucial moment of slapstick release, the Hermitage incident.
Right, to remind us he is still fundamentally a ridiculous chicken.
It's necessary low-stakes combat.
Oh, yeah. The general attacks the easy Mart-produced rack, shrieking fraud. He's trying to liberate the water balloons masquerading as the sun. He gets caught mid-rampage with his beak driven into a beefsteak tomato. It's just high comedy blended with military jargon.
And it's the perfect precursor to the high-stakes chaos of the Siege of Warren.
The actual climax is triggered not by tactical planning, but by a completely mundane mechanical failure, a sticky door lock on the F-150.
The logistics fail, and the Army of the Chicken is deployed accidentally.
It is. The general sees the Bradley County Tomato Co-op truck, and he charges. Bronchi follows, braying like the trumpet of the end of days. And when the donkey's hooves hit the brick streets of Warren, the bleed occurs.
Okay, let's expand on the bleed. This is where the story connects the current absurdity to deep, violent history.
The sound of Bronchi's hooves suddenly multiplies. It echoes the thunder on the bricks of the 1864 Union cavalry charge that tore through that exact area. The physical impact of the hooves on the historical infrastructure acts as this metaphysical key, and it just opens up the historical trauma that's inherent in the geography.
The violence of the past leaks into the present absurdity.
And it culminates in the destruction of 500 pounds of vine-ripe tomatoes. The general achieves his chaotic victory.
And the pacing here is brilliant. You have General Beauregard, covered in red pulp, standing on the highest crate, crowing the crow of a conqueror. And then frequency A instantly snaps back into focus.
The sheriff's cruiser turns the corner.
The driver's immediate thought, here comes the bill.
And that is classic Southern Gothic humor. The clash between this grand, mythic triumph and the immediate, mundane financial and legal consequences. The logistics officer knows the moment of myth is over, and the moment of liability has just begun.
After the victory and the arrest, the story gives the general his most poignant and powerful moment, near the ruins of the colony at Carmel.
Carmel, the former institutional warehouse. It's called the Zone of Silence, weighted down by the unheard. The general sees the foundations, the homes of people who were institutionalized for doing precisely what he is doing.
Seeing themselves as emperors or queens or solar authorities?
Yes, he confronts the fact that his war isn't just against the tomato, it's against the rigid geometry of a society that demands conformity.
And he whispers, touching his big chief pin, "The net is always waiting, driver. The cage is always open."
This is the thematic payoff. This is what elevates the general from a caricature to a truly tragic figure. His delusion is a conscious defense mechanism against being rendered feeble-minded. He chooses the fight because, in his mind, the alternative is just submission and silence.
And that truth justifies the entire absurd journey. The war is a necessary act of psychological self-preservation for both the general and the logistics officer.
It is.
The resolution in the Bradley County Jail is executed perfectly, too. It maintains that blend of humor and reality. The arrest is for tomato-related vandalism and inciting a riot with a donkey.
And Memo sends Brother as the perfect courier. Brother uses the remaining $18,000 from the Christmas bonus, that cash literally rooted in the earth, to pay the restitution and retrieve the man in charge.
It's the barter system settling a score in the bureaucratic system.
And even the seasoned sheriff expresses this grudging respect. He notes the general is in the drunk tank testing the welds on the cot.
And the final tactical message before their tactical withdrawal. The logistics officer hears the general tapping Morse code from the cell.
The war continues.
He understands this was a tactical defeat, but the strategic victory was achieved.
The validation of the myth, the disruption of the pink orb's commerce. But the deeper victory is an internal one, for the driver himself.
His reflection near the campfire confirms this. He realizes the farm was leaking, and not just water from the pool, but time and meaning. He admits, "I think I needed to drive. I needed to believe that something was happening."
And that is the narrative's final, central truth. The story isn't about a rooster winning a war against a vegetable. It's about the logistics officer manufacturing the necessary meaning and myth in a world where the old sources of meaning, the industry, the whistle, the stability, have all failed.
He found his purpose, the transport command of the geometry of resistance.
That's it.
So the story can't just end with chaos. It requires a synthesis, a stitching of the narrative. This is why the detour on the return journey is so important. It takes them through the Felsenthal National Wildlife Refuge, the Caddo Mounds,
Which are called the ancient roosts.
and a geographical conflux of the Saline and Ouachita rivers.
This detour grounds the whole ending in deep pre-industrial history. The Caddo Mounds are presented as the ancient roosts temples where the first roosters greeted the first sun.
So the general sees this deep history. He recognizes he's just the latest layer of sediment in a very long story of solar authority.
That shift in perspective is crucial. He's no longer just fighting for himself. He's fighting for the continuity of the myth.
And the ultimate synthesis happens at the conflux, where the Saline River, the river of isolation and lost history, meets the Ouachita, the river of commerce and modern dams. This is where the fracture that caused all those time slips finally resolves.
The general sees a log spinning endlessly in the turbulent water, and he interprets the turbulence not as chaos, but as structure. He watches the confluence and he realizes it is stitching. The water is sewing the land back together.
They've endured the journey through the fractured history, and the geography itself is confirming the repair.
Yes, and he corrects the driver's assumption that they fixed the world. He says, "We did not fix it. We endured it. The fracture is not a break, driver. It is a joint, and we have greased it."
That might be the most powerful line in the whole narrative structure.
It's incredible. It implies that frequency A and frequency B are not meant to be separated. They're a joint that has to be articulated. Their absurd journey, powered by myth and paid for by cash, greased that joint. It forced the integration of reality and myth.
The story suggests that life in the CCU requires this constant maintenance of the boundary between the real and the mythical.
It does. And the successful closing of the loop is confirmed by the quiet reappearance of their spectral ally.
The Phantom Steamboat, the HM Handy.
It appears again in the morning mist over the Ouachita. But this time, there's no frantic excitement, no declaration of naval support. The general gives the sharpest salute I had ever seen him execute. He acknowledges the ghost vessel in solemn silence.
And Bronchi adds his soft bray of recognition.
The ghost ship isn't a tactical asset anymore. It's a fellow pilgrim, acknowledging their safe passage. The history and the present have finally achieved a difficult harmony.
And the final step is the restoration of rhythm on the farm. The routine home is characterized by quiet dignity, not triumphant chaos.
And Memo's debriefing confirms this new reality. She doesn't ask if they won the war.
She asks if the son is safe.
And the driver chooses the mythic truth over the financial reality of the $18,000 loss. He affirms, he held the line, Memo, the logistics held, the tomato is vanquished. The logistics officer has now fully embraced his role as the chronicler, the enabler of the necessary myth.
And the story concludes with the general permanently filling the void left by the silent Crosset mill whistle.
At precisely 5:00:00 a.m., the exact time of the old industrial command, the general steps out, looks at his non-existent watch, and delivers the precise, resonant crow. Cock-a-doodle-doo. It's a military command, a statement of fact.
The sun is authorized to rise. He's replaced the rigid external command of industry with the necessary self-manufactured command of myth.
He has.
The narrator's final thought, entry 47. The synthesis, it just summarizes the entire saga. The need to manufacture your own gravity and myth in a decaying world.
He says the rooster fighting a rival god is necessary because it makes the farmer a hero, and not just dirt.
Without that manufactured gravity, the logistics officer would indeed float away or just sink into the mud of resignation.
The story confirms that the whole saga was essential for the Cooter farm to maintain its identity, its franchise. The tale, for all its chaos, is structurally sound because the absurdity is rooted in this profound emotional and existential necessity.
So, to fully summarize our deep dive into the saga of General Beauregard, we started with this high-concept experiment in storytelling AI tools meeting a massive lore Bible.
Right.
And the result is a structurally sound, profoundly funny Southern Gothic meditation on history, decay, and the absolute necessity of myth in the modern rural experience.
We can confidently tell the listener that this story is an unqualified success. It is absolutely worth reading. The humor is relentless, but it always serves a higher thematic purpose.
And the fiction sense.
The fiction sense is perfect. It's perfect because the logistics officer's internal emotional journey, his need to believe something was happening, provides the stable platform for the general's tactical madness. The story creates this deeply unified world where the high military seriousness perfectly excuses the existential crisis of a life lived after the machines have fallen silent.
It's a remarkable feat. It really validates the entire complex process used to create it. It's structurally sound, and I have to say, deeply satisfying.
And so here's the provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. The story's internal logic relies entirely on this exchange of value money for directions, reality for myth.
Right.
The final financial accounting shows they spent $18,000 to validate the war and to grease that joint between frequency A and B. But the epilogue shows the final, non-monetary confirmation. The soft, pulsing, impossible violet Cooter light winking in the darkness, a signal from the thin place. This confirmed that the narrative earned a currency the outside world can't measure. So the question is, what story of your life or your farm are you paying for next, now that the light has confirmed the existence of the thin place?
Something to think about as you navigate your own logistics. Until next time.